What's up, guys? So in this video, what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about a common question that comes up all the time in no matter what type of medicine you're practicing, and that is the idea of call shifts and what a typical call day is like for me as a psychiatrist, right? So let's dive right into it. The bottom line is call is part of any medical training that you're going to do. So you got to be prepared to go through those 24-hour calls. You got to be prepared to go through short call, long call, whatever your particular program has and whatever they want you to do in order to, make sure you're passing, make sure you're getting through the program efficiently. So with that said, I'm going to talk a little bit about my call day because I'm getting back from it just now. It's about almost 6 o'clock at night, not too bad, and I'll tell you a little bit about what my call is like as a psychiatrist, and it may vary a bit from program to program in terms of what you might be expected to do and how long you might be expected to be at the hospital, but the gist of it will basically be covered in this video. Now, when I was interviewing at different programs, I saw a variety of different types of call. There were some that were, in-house 24-hour calls every week. You had to do at least one. There were some that were home calls where you would just take your call directly from home and you would only have to come in if there was some kind of incident or reason for you to actually return to the hospital. There were other places that had absolutely no call. And in psychiatry, there's very rarely a psychiatric emergency. There's a couple of them out there, but there's very rarely anything that needs to be done right away. So it differs in many ways between, say, surgery or medicine, where there is a lot of situations where you may need to be exactly there on the spot, to handle a situation. So with that said, I'll tell you about my typical day. So generally on a call day, a weekend call day, I wake up sometime around 6 a.m. I have breakfast. I do whatever I got to do to get ready for the day, which usually involves gathering up food, water, whatever books I bring with me. I always bring Stahl's Prescriber's Guide, and I usually bring my pocket DSM with me. So I gather up my stuff, put it all together, have some breakfast, and I'm in the car by like 7 a.m. and usually to the hospital by 7:30 a.m. so that I can start getting a jump on my day. I personally like to review a little bit before I see patients. I like to know a little bit about what's going on, and that's really important if you're not on service at a given time. So if you're covering an inpatient unit like I am on the weekends, and you're not on the inpatient unit rotation at that time, you're not going to know anybody and you're not going to know what's going on there. So it might take you a half hour to review the charts to kind of get the gist of what's going on with your patients and what kind of questions you want to ask them when you're actually doing the face-to-face interviews. So I guess I should have actually prefaced this by saying I'm not covering the emergency department. My call shifts go from essentially 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. on a given day. So I'm responsible from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. for anything that goes on in the inpatient unit. So I'm not responsible for anything else beyond that, just the inpatient unit and consult service, but the consult service is only until 2 p.m. So I cover the consults until 2 p.m. and I cover the inpatient service from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. And that's a typical weekend call in terms of timing. So like I said, get there around 7:30, review some charts for a half hour. By 8 o'clock in the morning, I want to be in seeing my patients, my new patients. So I try to see all of the new patients right away. And for me, that cap is five intakes, five new inpatient admissions. So I'll be doing 5 admissions most weekend days. And that will be the start. And that usually take me until about 10 a.m. By the time you see everybody, by the time you find everybody, you put orders in for each patient, you make diagnoses, etc. It's all going to take time. So that will be the first part of my day. And also during that time of the day is when I have to do any of the involuntary paperwork. So it depends on your state, but in the state that I practice in, I have to do involuntary paperwork on patients who come in on involuntary status, meaning they don't want to be hospitalized, but the psychiatrist at the emergency department determined that they need to be hospitalized. So that paperwork is a 14-page document, and it takes about 15 minutes minimum to fill out. That's minimum. And if it's like someone has bad handwriting, or you can't understand what's going on, or you need to do more chart review, it could take even longer to do. So that's another thing that kind of complicates the initial part of my day. Depends on what status all of the new patients come in on, because if they're mostly invol, that's going to add time to my day. So that's the next thing. So around 10 a.m. I probably finish that up, and then I start to see all my follow-ups. So I'll have 10 follow-ups to do. So 5 intakes or 5 new patients, then an additional 10 follow-up patients. So I'll see my 10 follow-up patients, and I'll talk to them. I'll ask the basic questions. And for the most part, it's kind of cookie cutter questions, because on the weekend, you're not making a lot of changes. You're just kind of making sure people are stable, making sure they're well managed, and making sure there's nothing that, maybe the inpatient team missed during the week that you might catch. So that's essentially what it's for. So I'll ask basic questions. Are you having any suicidal thoughts, any homicidal thoughts? Are you eating? Are you sleeping? Is your depression better if you're depressed? Is your anxiety better if you're anxious? Are you hearing any voices, seeing any auditory visual hallucinations? Are you seeing any shadows? Are you seeing anything? Are the medications causing you to have any kind of side effects? Have you been attending groups and working with the other staff there that's also therapeutic while you're on the inpatient unit? And overall, what's your plan for discharge, and where are we sending you? What are we doing with you as you move forward? So that's kind of the basic gist of the questioning and line of questioning, and I'll adapt it depending on what the patient presented with, depending on what the plan was that the primary team started during the week, and then I'll work off of that and change my line of questioning based off of that information. So that does not take nearly as long as the 5 intakes, because again, they're 5 new patients. You got to take a full history. For those patients, you're doing progress notes. They're a lot shorter, and you don't have to ask as many questions. And again, the goal is to just make sure that the patient's stabilized, and that whatever the treatment goals of the primary team that's covering during the week is doing, you're following, and you're making sure you're doing the things that they want you to do. If they want you to titrate a med, you're titrating the med. If they want you, of course, provided it's safe, right? Provided it's not something stupid. You're doing whatever their plan is, essentially. After that, around 2 p.m., you have to do the consult. So there's a consult line, you call the consult line, you talk to them, and you figure out what consults on the medical floors you have to see. You're capped at 3 for that. So the total number of patients I'll see in a given day will be 18 patients. So it will be 5 intakes, 10 follow-up progress notes for inpatient unit, and 3 consult notes on the medicine floor. Now the consults can either be really short and easy, like if it's a stupid consult, then you're like, wow, this is dumb, I know exactly what to do, or there's nothing to do for that matter. You just send the person off, you sign off, you say, psychiatry signing off, this person's psychiatrically cleared. If it's a more complicated consult, again, it could take more time. You may have to call people for collateral information. You may have to spend a lot more time reviewing the charts. You may have to call the primary medical team and ask them, like, what is your question here? What are you trying to get us to answer? Because it may not be clear. So that's another part of the day that's kind of complicated. But once you finish that, it takes us to about 3 p.m., I'd say. And then for the rest of the day, at that point, from 3 to 5 p.m., you're typing notes. You're finishing your progress notes, you're finishing your H&Ps, and you're finishing your consult notes, which is a lot of work. So that might, in some cases, take a little bit longer than simply 2 more hours, But my impression is that I'm only obligated to be on site until 5. So I like to take a break at that point, go home, get some food, and then I'll finish my notes at home. And for the second part of the call, you're allowed to take it from home. You're allowed to essentially be called back in if you need to be, or you can do everything pretty much remotely these days with EMR. So with the EMR, you're able to, remote in, put orders in, check out labs, whatever essentially you need to do. The only thing that really brings you back to the inpatient unit is a restraints. If there is a patient that needs to be restrained in 4-point restraints, you absolutely have to see that person within a half hour, and you have to provide, make sure everything's going well, and you usually have to order medication and order the restraints. So that would be the one thing that might bring you back to the unit. And that pretty much wraps it up. I mean, that's like a typical call day for me. And again, it will vary depending on your program, but at my particular institution, that's about what we do. And it's a long day. It's a really hard day. 18 patients is a good number of people to see in a given day, and especially with 5 HMPs and 3 consults, because those notes, again, take a lot longer and require a lot more work. But anyway, I wish you guys the best of luck out there in your training, and I'll catch you up in another video.